I guess it's been about 6 weeks ago or so that I concluded preparing for this series that we're going through right now. Right before Easter, we concluded a few messages, and we talked about the fact that there's something that God expects from us, that there's more to us than what we have right here this morning. And really that's our faith, and our faith being put into practice every single day. Last week, we began this series through the book of James. And I know that as we began this series, it was going to be difficult for us to hear and to respond because of the way that we were brought up. Because when you think about your faith, you think about the traditions of your life and what you grew up believing. Things like you knew if you just got to church every Sunday that you were okay with God. That's all that mattered. Your attendance validated your salvation. For some of you, you grew up in a background where you were baptized as a baby, as an infant. And that was the security blanket for you to know that you didn't have to worry about how you lived the rest of your life because you were already taken care of. And that's hard. That's hard to hear when you understand that's not what God's purpose was for you. For some of you, you grew up in a background where you had revival services every year. You had camp every year. And if you got to that revival service or you got to that camp meeting, you hoped that you got a little bit of Jesus on you and you were going to be okay. For some of you, you had to keep going back every year because you didn't get enough Jesus on you. And your parents made sure that you went back because they saw the evidence of that. And by the way, for your parents, they kept going to revival meetings because they didn't get enough Jesus on them either. And for us, that's our mindset when we think about this whole issue of living out our faith. And you know, and I know that that's not true. In fact, this morning, all over our country, all over our world, there are people who are meeting just like us today. And they're wearing the right stuff. They got the right routine down. Did you notice that we transitioned from one part of the service to the next part of the service with very little complications at all? We succeeded. For some of us, that's the way we look at our service. If we can just get through without any hiccups, man, we've arrived. Do you know that that just doesn't matter at all? And for some of us, we rely upon those things. Folks, this morning I want you to know as we continue this series together, there are people who are meeting and they're going to walk out and there'll be no tire to the road. There will be no application to the life. We will come back next Sunday hoping to hear a good message. And if we got a good message, we'll walk out doing the same things that we were doing when we walked in. Your faith matters so much to God that He wants us to know that your life has more value than just your participation here on Sunday morning. It has more value than your baptism as an infant. It has more value than the revival service or the camp meeting that you went to. It has a whole lot more to do about how you apply your faith tomorrow and the next day and the day after that. This morning, we're going to talk about this book. In fact, for the next few weeks, we're going to be talking about the book of James. And last week, we heard James say something that absolutely brings us to our core, to our knees. He says that your faith without works is what? It's dead. He says it is almost to the point that if you're a Christian and you don't have works in your life, you might as well give up your faith almost. That's what he's saying. There needs to be an action behind what it is that you believe. What you do tomorrow is valuable to the kingdom of God. And that's what we're going to be talking about this morning. So what does faith look like out in the real world? What does it look like to you and to me? Well, James starts out, and I thought we'd just get this one out of the way first because it's the hardest one. It's the one that's going to be difficult for you, and it's going to be difficult for me. In fact, this morning, I've been an emotional wreck from the time that we had prayer meeting together to my Sunday school class to even as we stood here and we worshiped together, my heart has been turned again and again and again. Because I know that as soon as I say what I'm about to say to you next, you're going to say, man, that just doesn't feel right. That doesn't look good. How could God, who is such a loving God, allow me to go through that? So we're going to deal with the toughest one first today. So for those of you who are visiting today, I pray that you'll come back next week If you're going to make your faith something, folks, if you're going to make it work for you, then it has to be active, more than just emotion. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do this morning. If you have your Bibles, would you take it, turn to the book of James, chapter 1. We're going to start in the very first chapter. And as we do, if we understand that our faith is more than just going through the motions like we are here today, I pray that you're not. I pray that these are not just motions that you're going through. I want you to know something today. Your faith is important to God. Maybe if you don't write anything else down today in your notes, maybe just write down that. Your faith is important to God. And because your faith is important to God, it has to be active. He's going to allow you, please hear me, He is going to allow you in your life to go through some things that are negative. He's going to allow you to go through some things that are going to build up your faith. And they're not always going to be when you're on the top of the mountain. In fact, most of the time when your faith and my faith is being built up, it is never on the mountaintops. It is in the valleys. It is in those moments that nobody wants to be there. But it is also in those moments that He does His greatest work in your life, and your faith is built up even stronger because of the things that you have gone through. I like to characterize faith as a muscle, if you will. And not that I have a lot to show this morning in that regard, but I'll throw this out to you. If you have a muscle that is relaxed all the time, it becomes weak. But that's exactly the way God looks at your faith. If your faith is in that idle mode all the time, going through the motions, it becomes weak and faint. So there is a time of rest that God gives you in your faith, but there's also a time that He exhausts that faith. Those moments when you exercise that faith, because there's rest and there's exhaustment. There's rest and there's exhaust. There's moments when you exercise your faith, and there's moments in your relationship with God that He allows you to experience the top of the mountain as well. And it's important that you understand that as we get started, because there's this mindset that as Christians, we don't go through anything that's difficult, that we don't have difficult times. And I want you to know that that's a lie from the pit of hell, because you will go through the same things that everybody else goes through. The only difference is you have a resource. You have something in your life that is going to change your outcome. And it's not just you, it's what's living inside of you. So if you have your Bibles this morning, I want you to look at this with me when he talks about what does this faith look like. So James chapter 1, verse 1, it says this: James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes scattered among the nations, greetings, he says. Now, I want you to understand something about this. He is basically writing to some Jewish Christians. Like himself and like the Jews that he's writing to, he has been persecuted. They have gone through difficult times. They have been scattered all over the known world of that day. These folks, these believers in the way, understand that there is persecution in their life. James is writing to them because he wants them to know that just because you're going through persecution right now, it is not because God is void. It is not because God is absent. God is doing something in you and through you right now that's going to bring you out on the other side better than you ever have been before if you trust Him, if you believe in Him. So he says, greetings to you. He says this in verse 2. He says, consider it, and this is nuts, consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds. And if we didn't know who wrote this book, I mean, we didn't know it was James, if I'd be just like you, I'd close the book and said, that guy's a lunatic. That is not what life should be like. I don't count any trials, tribulations, pure joy. James says, though, I want you to consider it pure joy. And see, the Jews, the Christians of that day, you know what? They asked the same questions that you and I ask. And maybe you're not like I am. Maybe you're not like some of the Christian Jews during that day. But let me tell you, they asked questions like, God, where are you? And God, why would you allow my wife or my kids to go through that? God, if you were here, why would you allow cancer to just fall over top of my wife or my grandmother? Those are the kinds of things that you live with every single day. And you know what James says in the midst of that? He says, count it pure joy when you go through those trials. I don't know about you, but I've never woke up in the morning and said, wow, I just hope things go bad today, so I can count it pure joy. That's nuts. But James says, listen, there's more to it than this. Now I have to explain something, because even in our culture, I think it's the same in many ways as it was even back then. There was this mindset that back then, that if you went through bad times, then God's favor wasn't on you. You've done something horrible. Your issues, your circumstances are because of some things that you've done wrong. So if you're going through difficult times, you've done something wrong. If you're living in good times, then you're in good favor with God. So it's almost like bad things, no God. Good things, good God. That's kind of the way they looked at it. And you know what's funny? We look at that and we say, that sounds crazy. But you know what? I think sometimes we think like that. Bad things, no God. Good times, good God. And that's not the way it is. God says, I am with you all the time. So James starts out with this tough issue. He says, trials of any kind, consider it pure joy. Yet, here's the pushback. You and I would say, but James, you don't know my story. And quite honestly, I can look out in this room right now, and I can see the loss of a loved one. I can see the battle of cancer. I can see the relation issues that you're going through right now. You know who you are. And I've gone through it. We all go through it. And James says to you and to me, I want you to consider it pure joy. I know your story, because your story is no different than the other stories. But I promise you this, no matter what your story is, there's still the same God. And he loves you. And he has a plan. And all you have to do is to trust him and to count what you're going through as an opportunity to praise God. Now, I know that if we were to end right there, that would be nuts. It'd be almost like, Pastor, you're telling us to do something that's almost literally impossible. How do we move from this place where any trial of any kind brings us to our knees, to that place where we can count it pure joy? Well, it's a good thing that James doesn't stop there, right? So let's look at this together this morning. Look at verse 3. He says, because of this, he says, because you know that the testing of your faith, and he says basically this is what it is. God sees your trials as a testing of your faith. You see, for us, we say, oh God, the world's falling apart. God says, nope, it's just a testing of your faith. We look at the world and we say, oh no, I don't like this. I don't like what I see out there. And God says, oh no, it's not that. It's just a testing of your faith. He says, you know what? I want you to understand there are evil things. There's tragic things. There's marriage issues. There's money issues. There's kids issues. And he says, I want you to know that in the midst of those trials, it's not an absence of God. I'm here. It's just the testing of your faith. And that's what he's showing us. But see, that's not enough either. Because if we really want to get to that point where the things of this life does not break our foundation, it doesn't cause us to walk away from God, what is it then that we need to do? See, James just doesn't leave us hanging there. He gives us some hope. He gives us some opportunities to learn from it. You see, I don't know what you think, and I don't know what your experiences have been, but from God's perspective, those things that I just mentioned are not victories of Satan. You know, every time I see things, and I have this mindset too, when I see things happening in the world, I think, oh, Satan's getting a victory. Sometimes you and I got to look at that and say, no, it's not just Satan getting a victory. It's God who is testing us. What will you say when you are put in the place of tragedy and difficulties? In those moments, do you just give Satan the victory, or do you say, man, God, what is it that you want to do with me? What is it that you want to change in me? What is it that you want to adjust in my life so that I can truly look at the situations and say, I don't have an answer, but I'm trusting you. I don't have an answer, but my faith will not be shattered. I will trust in you and I will follow you regardless of what comes my way. And some of you already know what that looks like. So he gives us some more information, just because none of us are content with that much information yet. He goes on, look at verse 3. He says, because you know that the testing of your faith, here's what it does. It develops perseverance. And I don't know about you, but when things get really bad, you know, I don't look at that and say, man, I can't wait to grow more. You know, I don't look at bad things and say, oh, this is going to be a good opportunity for me. But here's what God has to say. This thing about perseverance and this thing about endurance, we can say at the end of the day, you know what? I believe. Now, I wrote this down just this morning because I was having a hard time with this, and I was struggling with it in my own heart. And so I added some things to my notes just to kind of to give you an understanding about what I mean by this passage here. And you know, sometimes when I look at the things that are going on in my own life, I say to myself, I can't see it, God. And sometimes when I say that to myself, what I'm really saying is, God, I don't know if I can trust you because I got to see it. Or maybe you're in one of those places where you say, God, I don't understand. And because I don't understand, maybe somehow I have this mindset that, God, since I don't understand, then this thing can't be of you. And that's the tragedy. The reality of it is, what he really wants us to be able to do is that in the midst of the trial, the thing we don't understand, the thing that doesn't feel good, what he really wants from you and from me is to be able to look at him honestly, not just with words, but mean it right here in your own heart and say, I don't understand, I may not like it, but I believe. I believe in you. I believe that you are still in control. And when those things around us, those things that are less than what we really truly need, that we lean upon, when those tragedies come, you know, and I don't know about you, but I wish I could say this is 100% of the time, every single time. But sometimes when tragedy comes my way, difficulties come my way, I don't know if it's just a guy thing or what it is, but you know what I want to do right away? I want to fix it myself. Because somehow, some way, if I have my hands on it, I got control of it. And if I got control of it, I can fix it. Until I wake up and get a reality check and realize I can't do anything on my own. And maybe that's a guy thing, maybe that's just human nature thing. But you know what I want to say to you this morning is that at the end of the day, what God really wants is when you can walk to the very end and you can say, I could rely upon anything else in this world, but the very first thing that I'm going to seek out is you. I'm going to lean on you because I don't understand, I don't like it, and it doesn't feel good. But just because I don't understand, just because I don't like it, and just because it doesn't feel good, I'm trusting in you. Because that's where my faith is going to grow. I'm not going to put my faith in something that has no meaning. I'm going to put my faith in the thing that matters the most. And by the way, we'll get back to that in just a moment. But I want you to kind of follow along because he gives us some more information in regards to this. Look at verse 4. He says, perseverance must finish its work. And he kind of almost gives us this definition, if you will. He says, so that you may be mature. And boy, some of us really need maturity. Some of us need to be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Did you catch that? We are allowed to go through the struggles of life, the things we don't like, the things that don't feel good, because of perseverance. And that perseverance creates something that is maturity and completeness in our lives. Lacking for, and I love this, nothing. That means that you don't need anything else but him. That's what he's looking for. He doesn't want you to rely upon the things of the world. He doesn't want you to rely upon me. He wants you to rely upon him. And if you will seek him first with all your heart, the trials and the temptations of this world are so much less difficult for you and I to go through if we're with him. Now, I said this in my own heart, and I wrote it down for myself, and you don't have to write this down, but I think that it's true, that it's about you enduring your faith to that point where there's nothing else that you would hang your faith on except for Christ. And when that happens, there's a change that takes place. I don't know about you, but when a person puts their faith in nothing but God, I think it's in those moments that they truly don't lack for anything. I think it's in those moments when you truly are completely sold out for him. It's in those moments that you realize, I don't need anything else. It's when we try to do on our own and depend upon other things that leave us wanting and leave us empty. And Jesus says, I'll never leave you empty. I'll never leave you wanting. I will give you exactly what you need. I think this about adversity, and God knows, like I said earlier, I hate going through adversity just like you do. And when I was younger, I blamed God for everything that I went through in my life from the time that I was a child till I was a teenager. And I always believed this, the activity of God is when he was present. When he's active, it feels good. And when I don't get what I want and I don't see what I want, then I think God's not present. And let me tell you, sometimes it's in those moments when it doesn't feel like he's active that he is moving the most. And it's when he is the most active. It's the moments when you're going through cancer. It's the moments when you're in the hospital for months upon months upon months, and you don't understand why you're there. It's in those moments, folks, that God does a work. I don't know about you, but there's some times, and I know that I'm probably alone in this. I think there's some times that when I wake up in the morning and everything's been going good in my life, you know what I don't do that I should do? It's in those moments that things are great that I wake up and I say, I don't say this, by the way. I don't wake up and say, God, oh, I need your presence in today no matter what, Lord, be with me. I don't do that when things are going good. You know when I really cry out and wake up in the morning and say, God, oh, how I need you right now. I don't want to take a next step without your presence. You know when those times are? It's when it's not good. It's when I'm going through the trials, and it's in those, and God says, well, guess what? That's why I allow you to go through them. Because when things are good and nothing is bothering you and you're on cloud nine all the time, are you going to turn to me? Are you going to seek my face? Or are you going to live for yourself? And how many times do we find ourselves doing just that? And God says, that's why I want your faith to become like a muscle. I want to exercise it. I'm going to give you some rest, but I'm going to cause your faith to work to produce endurance so that you lack nothing in your life. You know, I'm not saying this because she's here this morning. In fact, I was going to ask her if she was in service today. But I want to give you an example of what I'm talking about. It's nowhere near the reality of Jesus and me. But you know, there's certain people in my life that when I'm at my worst, have you ever been at that place before when the people around you don't want to be around you? You ever been there? Can I just ask for a testimony of that right now? Is there anybody other than me? Okay, good. I appreciate that. For the rest of you, you'll lie about a lot of other things too, so I'm not even going to listen. But you know, when I'm at my worst and when things are not good, you know there's always that one person outside of Christ that I always know is going to love me unconditionally and always be there, ready to be there for me. That's when I feel the love the most. It's from my wife. It's when I feel that from her. And why do I tell you that this morning? Is it so that I can build up my wife? Yeah, that's pretty much it. No, there's more to it than that. Sorry, I was thinking out loud. There's more to it than that, because you know what? I want you to think about somebody else for just a minute. I want you to think a moment about, why did Jesus Christ die on a cross for you and for me? You ever think about that? Was it because he had a personal benefit in it? Was there something he was going to get from that? You know, hanging on the cross, something was going to come his way. He was going to get something out of it? No. I want to suggest that he did it for two reasons. And you can write these down if you want to. Probably should have put them on Media Shout so you could have seen them. But let me give you two real quick. The two things I think that caused him to stay on that cross. The first is this. Is because he would say to you and I love the Father and I trust him. That's the first thing. I love the Father and I trust him. And I got good news for you this morning. The second one is just as important as the first. And the second is this. I love the people for whom I was sent. I love the people for whom I was sent. And you know what that means for you and for me? That no matter what it is, folks, that you think about your life or what it is that you're going through, your Heavenly Father loved you so much that he died on a cross so that he could have a relationship with you. Not so that he could become a void or non-participant in your life, but he wants to engage in your life. He wants to engage in your life when you're going through the mountaintops and everything is great. But he wants to engage in your life when you don't have an answer and when the struggle is hard and there's no job opportunity and the money situation is tough and the relationships at home are just a little tense. God says, I want to be in that as well. That's the kind of God that you and I serve. Now, I told you, James doesn't leave anything out, okay? So he's got more to say to us than just that. Look at the verse 5 real quick. He says, if any of you, this is what you can ask for, folks. He says, if any of you lack wisdom, which we don't have to testify to that. We all need a little bit more of that. He says, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to him. So in the middle of all of this, he says, in the midst of your trials, your tribulations, the moments that you're in the valley, he says, I want you to ask for wisdom. I want you to ask for it. And you know what I love about it? He says, I not only will give you some wisdom, but I'll give you generously what you need. And he says, I want you to ask for relief, for which I say, Lord, I'm not asking for wisdom. I'm asking for you to solve it. I'm asking you, Lord, to fix it. God says, no, it's not always just asking me for your checklist, your grocery list of prayer requests. That's not what I want. He said, I want more than that. I want you in the moment of your trial, your tribulation, I want you to seek wisdom. So then, you know what that causes? It helps you and I to see as God sees. You don't always understand what God's thinking, right? I know I don't. And God says, I want to give you wisdom so that in the moment that you're in, that season of life that you're in, you don't have to struggle and doubt your salvation or your walk with Christ. You just simply ask for wisdom so I can give you guidance so you don't lose your faith, that your faith becomes active every single day. You see, there's a promise, and here's the promise. The promise in God's word says that he will grant you something in the midst of your trials, and it's wisdom. He's going to grant you something, and it's wisdom. It's not a fix necessarily, but it's wisdom. But to be fair, and I want to be fair this morning, to be fair, he adds a little bit more to that. So here's what he says. But when you ask, okay, you're not just going to say, I need wisdom. He says, but when you ask, here's what he wants you to understand. He must believe and not, what's the last part? Doubt. You need to believe and not doubt. Ask from the standpoint of whatever it is, Lord, I'm not going to question you. I'm going to ask for wisdom. But it's not because I don't believe in you. It's not because I don't understand that you're void somehow. I'm going to believe. I'm not going to have doubt when I ask. I'm going to trust in you regardless. And because he who doubts, he says, because he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. You see, the person who looks and says, when things are great, God is good, and when things are bad, God is absent. Suddenly, Jesus dying on the cross doesn't mean anything anymore, does it? Suddenly, Jesus telling you and I that you and I can have eternity life with him doesn't mean anything anymore. Why is that? In the midst of all it, why would we doubt when the promises are there for you? That he died on a cross so that you could live, and that you have the opportunity to spend eternity with him. And everything else that might happen in your life, you may not understand it, but God says, my promises are there for you. Don't worry about the things you're going through right now, because I'm still there. And what I promised you when you gave your heart to me, I still trust in that. I still know you have an opportunity. You don't have to wonder about those things. He's still valid in your life. Folks, he says these are people who talk out both sides of their mouth. Don't one day wake up and say, I have faith and I have trust when you're on the mountaintop. It's when you're in the valley that you cry out and say, God, I trust you. Don't doubt him in those moments. Ask for wisdom so that he can do a completion in your life. See, we start suddenly saying, this idea, Jesus, I know that you died on the cross for me, but right now, man, I don't get it. God says, I want you to trust. And go from the standpoint is, I will trust you no matter what. No arguing, no bargaining. I still remember when I first gave my heart to Jesus, and I did it for all the wrong reasons. I've told the story so many times, you're tired of hearing it. In fact, I'm tired of telling the story. But let me tell you one more time. I came to Jesus. You know why I came to Jesus? Because I wanted my marriage to be saved. I wasn't coming to Jesus because I wanted to follow him. I wanted him to fix my marriage. You know how crazy that is? You know how stupid? I can say that because it's me. It was stupid. What was I thinking? God says, you think I'm going to let you off the hook? I'm just a genie that you just kind of rub the lamp and hope that everything works out. I'm more than that. I want to give you something. I want to give you a life. I want to give you a promise. And folks, he could have just saved the marriage, but he went so much further than that. In the midst of the trial, he didn't just save my marriage, but he pointed me to Christ. The Holy Spirit pointed me there. He pointed my wife to Christ. Our marriage is not the same. Our marriage is different today. And it's only different not because our marriage is saved. And by the way, don't you just hate it when you hear people say that? I just want to save my marriage. If that's all you're interested in is just saving a marriage, let me tell you, forget about it. Have a relationship. Build that relationship. Just to call it a marriage to be married, save the relationship. It's deeper than that. And Jesus said to my heart, he said, what I want to give you is deeper than just you saving your marriage. It takes more than just living like that. And I want to tell you, this last part is important. Look at verse 12. He kind of wraps this up, and then I'm going to as well. Look at verse 12. He said, blessed is the man who perseveres under trial, because when he has stood the test, you've gone through all those things that we've been talking about, he will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. You know, can I just give you a snapshot of what he's talking about here real quick? And you might want to write this down. This will be important. At the end of life, did you know that there's a judgment? Did you know that? Liam knew it. And you know what? Let me tell you something. Here's what you understand that you and I get at the end of time. You endured. What is it in this life that you went through? Whatever it is that you went through in this life, guess what? You endured it. And you know what Jesus says to you and to me? You endured it, and here's a crown of life because you loved me. Let me tell you, folks, that's huge. Can you imagine standing before the Heavenly Father and him looking at you and saying, here's your crown. You endured. And guess what? It's all because you loved me. It's all because you trusted in me. Folks, let me tell you something this morning. The relationship that Christ wants with you is not a part-time relationship. What he really wants from you and from me is for you and I to be committed to him all the time. And yes, there'll be trials. Prepare yourself for it. It's going to be times that's not easy. Prepare yourself for that. Understand there are going to be moments like that. But it's not in vain. There's a purpose behind it. The purpose is to build your faith up so that you won't waver. So your testimony to others will be so powerful that they'll want what you have. Can I just tell you, here's the ending of my story today. Do you know why I know this is true? I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you why this is true. Because I have seen it. I've seen it played out in people's lives. I was telling the prayer group, we meet at 8:15. By the way, you can come and join us any Sunday morning for that. But I was telling our prayer group, I do something once a week and I never forget to do it. Every week I walk out into the lobby, into the foyer, and there's a tree right out here on the outside that has names on the leaves of individuals who have passed away in our church. Can I take you back to just a couple real quick? I'm pretty good on time. Let me share a couple stories with you. I remember two specifically that went through the trials. They were in the midst of the trials. They didn't cry out. Not once did this person cry out. By the way, her name was Pat Hurd. Many of you know her, many of you don't. When she found out she had cancer, I never once heard her pray, Lord, heal my body. I never heard her say that once. Talked to her many, many times, sat in her home with her many, many times. You know what she did? Every time we got together, I could barely have an opportunity to pray for her. She barely would let me do that. You know what she wanted to do? She wanted to pray for her kids. She wanted to pray for her husband. She wanted to pray that her testimony would be a lasting effect on other people's lives. And if it meant death to her, it was so be it. It didn't matter. Now, did she have a death wish? Did she want to die? No. But she knew that this was not something that God had missed. It wasn't something that God kind of took a vacation and came back and, oh, Pat's got cancer. It wasn't like that. She understood that whatever happened in her life, it was an opportunity for it to test her faith, to build her faith, that made her faith endure. And not only that, but it made her complete. And you know what? It did. She left this world with the kind of confidence that I cannot describe. Another person, Ann Schrock left this world. And as difficult as it is for me to even talk about it right now, in the midst of all the trials and all the pain that she went through, you know what she leaned on? It wasn't on her pastor, although she appreciated us. It was the Word of God. She was in her hospital bed laying there one day, and I'll never forget the story. I saw it unfold right in front of me. Ann had been kind of out of it for a couple of days, had not really spoken much at all. And a whole lot of us were at the hospital room that day. And my wife was sitting beside of her, and she was reading scripture to Ann. And I'm so glad it was you and not me, by the way. Elena said to Ann, she said, Ann, I've come to this word, and I don't know how to pronounce that word. So I'm just going to take a stab at it. And before Elena could even say anything, you know what happened? For the first time in a day or two, you know what came out of Ann's mouth? The name of the person that Elena could not pronounce. Do you know why she was able to do that? Because she had leaned so heavily on the Word of God that every word and every name meant something to her. It was her foundation. It was her strength. It was the wisdom that she received. It's the reason why she didn't blame God. She wasn't angry at God. It just made her stronger in her faith. And I want you to know, folks, none of these stories that I have shared is about people who are extraordinary. Gosh, I look up and see if the skies are going to fall. They were wonderful people. But they were not wonderful people because of who they were. They were wonderful people because of who God made them to be. It was Christ living in them. It was them looking at life and saying that no matter what comes my way, my God is more than able. And He will give you everything you need. And He will test your faith. But on the other side, He will build you up. I'm going to ask that you stand with me this morning. And we're going to sing together. And I just want you to know that this is a church, the altars are always open. And maybe right now you're in that place. You've got that bad report from the doctor and it's not good. It's going through it one more time. And you just don't know if you got the strength to get through it again. And maybe you just need to lay that at the altar and just say, Lord, I believe. And I'm going to pray for wisdom. And I want you to complete a work in me because of who you are. Not because of what people can give me, but because of who you are. Maybe it's a relationship right now. Maybe right now you're in a tough relationship and you just simply need to make that right. And what you need to do is to ask God for the wisdom to do the work that is required so that He can receive the glory. He gets to receive the glory for what you do in this world. Are you going through a difficult time at work? Maybe your work's uncertain. Maybe you just don't know if you can stay there one more week and you need wisdom. And so here's God saying, ask and I'll give it to you. I'll give you everything that you need. As we sing together, I want you to know no one's judging. No one's going to look down upon you. This is just between you and God. And you get to make that decision for yourself. Are you going to lean on that or are you going to lean on Him? You're going to lean on the world or you're going to lean on the one who died for you and gave you a promise that even if you're scattered, even if you go through the trials, I'm still there for you, He says. That's your decision, to choose Him or to reject Him. You can live in the world or you can live for Him. That's the decision. Let's sing together this morning. If you want to pray, the altars are open. I'd like to ask that you'd close your eyes this morning. Would you do that for me? Because I feel with my heart today, and I'm not the only one here today who understands this or has experienced this for themselves. And I just want you to hear my heart. I don't know what you're going through right now. I don't know what your struggle is right now, but I know this, that you and I serve the same God. And the same God who promised me, and I want you to know, who keeps His promise, will keep his promise for you too. So maybe you're here today and you'd say, Pastor, here's my situation. I don't have an answer for what I'm going through right now. I don't even like what I'm going through right now. I didn't wish for it. I didn't long for it. But here I am, and I'm in it. And maybe you would say today, I haven't asked for wisdom. I haven't asked the Lord to complete a work in me, to use this situation or this difficult time to build my faith. I never thought about it that way. But I need my faith to be built. I need it to be complete. If that's you today and you say, Pastor, this week, would you pray for me? Would you give me wisdom to know that I can look and say, Lord, not my will be done, but your will be done. If you'd like for me to pray for you this week with every head bowed and every eye closed, will you raise your hand? I see your hand. I see it. I see it. I see it. Yep. I see it. Yep. I see it, brother. I see it. Can I tell you that it's you today and it's going to be somebody else tomorrow? If you're here and you didn't raise your hand, I want you to prepare yourself. The day will come when the trial will come. And you need to be ready. What will your answer be? Will it be, I hate it, I don't like it, God, you're not loving me anymore, you're not there anymore? Or will you simply say, God, I'll trust you. I'll trust you with this, and I'm going to trust you tomorrow too. You need to be ready for that, because the time will come for you too. Father, this morning we come to you, and we already know that the reality of life is this, that trials will come our way. And Lord, we need you. There's nothing in this world we need more than your presence. So help us, Lord. Help us to remember the words that James spoke to us, those crazy words that are so very true for us, that our faith without works is dead, and the way that our faith is built is through the perseverance of the trials of life, so that, Lord, that we can look back and we can say, I trust you. I'm giving you all, Lord, everything. Build me up. Make me what you want me to be. Whatever comes my way, let it glorify you. Because of the response, because of the way that I respond to everything that this world brings me. Let your kingdom up there come down here and dwell in me, Lord. Let it start with me, Lord, today. Holy Spirit, move and do what only you can do, Lord. And we will not forget to give you all the praise and all the glory for who you are and how you keep your promise every single time. Lord, we love you. And it is in your precious and wonderful name that, Lord, that we pray together today. And all of God's people said, amen. God bless you. Have a wonderful day in the Lord. Would you do that?